We're struggling here with security. You know, what are the typical struggles if it's categorizable?
Typical struggles if it's categorizable.
Maybe we can like split it up in like in CI/CD pipelines, like DevSecOps, monitoring, secure coding. Maybe in those four categories.
Just throw something in there. Just like long questionnaires. Hello, I'm Jan. I'm from Risk Consult Leuven, colleague from Stijn. Nice to see you here. Nice suits. Interesting is actually is to see like when you're approaching clients, you have like long lists of questionnaires to fill out. Always SAP, always for yesterday, and so this is like this is a challenge. For example, just want to see what your advice to that would be.
I think it's what I mentioned. You need to be prepared. It's too late when you receive the questionnaire. That's one thing. So the second thing is that you should typically it's standard questionnaire. Banks will have their own questionnaire that they send to big customer, a big supplier and small supplier. So if you are IBM, you have a big team that can answer this questionnaire. If you are a small fintech, it's a lot more complex. So you should discuss with your customer, and there are some questions that do not apply to you probably, or you need to negotiate between quote, because for a fintech it's difficult to apply the same rule, and it's true that some company will have all kind of certification, and it will be easy for them to reply. No, I have seen some small company that could not even understand the question. I helped one company that didn't know what ISO 27001 was, so it's very difficult for them to answer. So, like some other speaker mentioned, ask help. They are experts that can help you. Don't accept anything from your customer. It's not always easy, and be prepared.
So one of the things as well, having looked at these questionnaires, coming back, is be transparent. Even if you know that you're not good, do not try to hide it, because it's easy to see. And if they see that you're trying to hide things, then you lose their trust and it's worse. So be frank on that, and as well as what you said, if it's the first time, ask help to do it, because it's not always that much work to properly complete it. And once you have done it, you can reuse it for the future. So it's not always going to be different. It can be different, but it's not always going to be different. So once you have a good basis, you can reuse it.
Yeah, maybe an advice, because I'm also consulted in that kind of area, making fintechs come into relationships with big banks, for example. And one of my experience and advice now is that you should go gradual, meaning it's not necessary to fill in a whole TPSA for just entering into a relationship. So start small. Yeah. You may start small, and also your security or procurement process may also think about entering into a relationship gradually. So first fill in a subset of what is important for the first 3 months or for the first months, and then depending on the level of intimacy or integration you get, then you raise the level of questions and the level. But that's also something to learn from security services or procurement services, to go gradual and in a kind of co-creation, also co-creation into the relationship actually. Thanks a lot, mate.
Maybe to just add something, Jan, so banks, they look at risks. So if you are a young, innovative company and your solution sits really close to the core of the activities of the bank, you will not be able to negotiate a lot on having a smaller questionnaire. So if your solution or service or whatever you provide to the bank is business critical or is glued into a business critical function of what the bank is delivering to their customers, then they will do everything what it takes to understand the risk and to make you liable in case something falls over or you there is a problem. But if you're big or small, I don't think that will really help in the negotiation. It's more like how close to the core is your piece of software or your service. So.
What we will try during the module, what we will try to do during the module is to combine a few examples, so at least you have a full list of question, even in some domain that perhaps not all of you are working. But so after that you will have a good view on how to answer to the different category of question.
Maybe one small remark. The reason why companies are now, let's say, annoying everybody or their customers or in a supply relationship with the questionnaires is that the business basically negotiating the contractual agreement that questionnaires, let's say, the right to audit was, let's say, mandatory within the contract. Now, it all depends how well you negotiate it. And if you don't, let's say, negotiate it very well, then you will still get the annoying questionnaires ad infinitum. So what we see is that silo-based information security approach doesn't work anymore. You need to convince your business, talk to the business people. It's the same like when I said the quote of Gartner, cybersecurity ratios will become as important as your credit ratios. But the CFO doesn't care about, let's say, the cybersecurity ratios. But if people pop in and say, you have a questionnaire, you didn't fill it out completely, the second time you get an even worse assessment on your desk, and the third time maybe 2-3 people stand on your desk and say, we come to audit your department for the next couple of weeks, days, weeks. So I would encourage, as you being startup scale-up, don't, let's say, uit het oog verliezen the contractual agreements when you negotiate with either customers or even people that are interested in venture capitalists, for example. Don't lose them out of your sight.
Yeah, I want to complete one more thing on that. I'm on the other side, meaning I'm not an expert in completing the questionnaires. I'm just like more at the small startup willing to work with banks and things like that. So we often get those TPSAs. What I learned from it is be straightforward and very honest. If you don't have something, if you're just not doing something, be honest about it and explain why you're not doing that or how you're mitigating that. And what we've learned from that is if there's a very good reason to not do something because it's just not applicable because of X, Y, and Z, then they will accept that as well as a valid reason. But don't answer the questions with yes and no, because, well, then you're going to be hit hard. But just explain and be straightforward, be honest, because that's, like you're saying, if they catch you one time on lying on something, the trust is gone. And that's what you need with your supplier, with your customer. The one thing you can never lose is the trust. So be very open, be very straightforward, and explain things. That's what I learned from it, at least, from completing them, not from, so, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I had a small question. I'm not an IT expert, but sometimes we are in contact with fintechs, and my question was, what should we consider as a budget to make sure that you're protected against cybersecurity? Patrick was very clear. He gave the pricing of his training, so we know in order to get a seal, 9,000 euros plus. But what do you think fintech or a scale-up should really consider as a budget? Because for me, as a financier, it's very important to know that and to make sure that they incorporate it in their business plan.
Do you have an IT budget?
No, I'm not an IT background. I'm financier.
But do you have an IT budget already, or
In a company.
in your company, or well, typically it's between 3 to 5% of an IT budget that you need to allocate to cybersecurity.
What we see numbers that are higher, it's like typically up to like 10% that we're actually seeing. So. Well.
If I may, also depends what you consider as a security budget. For example, educating your developers, is it security? Is it part of the standard baseline of the training or their knowledge? All depends, or is it only the upper part, like the budget for the pen tests? I don't know. Depends what you want to cover.
If I hear you correctly, let's say that we take the 8,000 of B-HIVE as a given, we should consider, let's say, if you're on the prudent side, 10% of your IT budget. So if you have an IT budget of 200,000, this fintech should consider 20,000 to protect ourselves.
I think it's impossible for anyone here, but you can interrupt me. I think it's impossible for anyone to just give you a blunt number of what should. It's impossible. It's depending on the company size, on all those things. Where are you? How mature are you in security? All those things, they all care. They all matter when you talk about how much budget should I spend. If you're not doing anything, even for me, the smallest budget will get you somewhere already. And I think that everybody should do security in any way, and I think there are a lot, like this person from BitSensor earlier said, like there are a lot of open source tools, free tools, all those things help as well, but of course they cost time, so there's always budget involved, but there's and not anyone that can just tell you like a minimum this much.
You need to look at your risk. Huh? It's first you need to analyze the risk, and then you can see the impact, and then you define your risk appetite, and based on that. You look at what control you need to put in place to decrease your risk profile. But you need to start from your risk. There is no answer to your question because it's really dependent of what's your business. Huh? You could have some small fintech that will have to invest a huge amount, but it's also part of the value that they will bring to their customer. Huh? And there are some big companies that are just, I don't know, building, producing product where there is not a lot of cyber issue. Huh? So analyze your risk, and based on your risk, define your budget.
Somebody asked me, how much will it cost to develop an app? I said, what kind of app? Well, give me bold figure. Well, I don't know what you are talking about. And this is exactly the same. Where are we today and where we want to be based on risk, as Philippe mentioned very well. And the question is, what is important for us? What is the business objective of that bringing security? What security is required to do exactly? We're not going to cover all risks. So risk-based, yes, true, but what risk? Not all risk could be covered. We are not going to accept to cover all risk because it's too much money. So the question at the end of the day is, what kind of compromise are we going to find in order to cover what kind of risk, and how much are we going to cover them, and how sustainable is that coverage that we are going to put in place, that we are going to on which we are going to spend some money. And based on that, we have to take a decision, compromise decision. How much will we spend money in order to cover what kind of risk, and based on that we go ahead.
More questions?
Hello, Christian from Digital. We are in FinTech and we will attend the session, the program.
Thank you.
Yeah, we are there. So, in fact, it's my colleague Jonathan who will attend the program. He's IT architect and loves cybersecurity, so I know that he will be like a fish in the water. However, I'm not IT at all, and I was wondering, in case of I attend some of your session, if I will be crying like a child, or if there is any chance that I understand the main points of your different programs.
Yeah, well, at least when Patrick mentioned the modules, the first module, which is the basic of cybersecurity, I think you can bring your mother-in-law, even she will understand, and she will be appreciating.
And then maybe for the last module, the module where we're looking at incident response and doing the incident game, in fact, with Enviso. I think it's important to bring as many people as possible. To bring not just the 2 people, but come with 3, 4, and not just IT people. Maybe if you have someone doing communication and marketing, bring that person as well during that specific session, because we'll look much beyond cybersecurity, of course. It's also crisis communication. It's challenging. It's a roller coaster. I think it's going to be really fun. More questions?
Thank you.
Maybe one last question? Yes, over there.
I wonder what the best time or the best stage of a startup would be to enter the program. me and some friends, colleagues want to start something. We didn't write a single line of code yet. Should we enter already or not yet?
Thank you for that question. There is a Japanese saying that says the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. And the second best time to plant it is now. And I think especially with a startup, this is very much the case. So there is a lot of evidence that if you build in by design cybersecurity from the start, not just in the code and infrastructure and the architecture of your software solution, that you are winning a lot of time. So I can give you an example of a tech startup who was in HR doing other things, planning technical things, integrating with providers, and they made their MVP. It was a really cool SaaS solution, but the very first assessment they had, and that was by the time they thought, okay, we're ready to launch, that was all red flags. And they had to redo basically their software architecture. I can tell you, at that point in time, they were burning cash at a much higher rate. And then they had to redo the software architecture. I can tell you it's 6-7 months that they kept burning before they could launch. So that was the cost. So exponentially higher than compared to when you start doing it from day one.
Okay, great.
One sentence probably. Security by design is the only viable option. Otherwise, it's too expensive to afford afterwards. So you need to know about it from the beginning, even before you conceive.
Okay, I want a very big round of applause for our content providers for being here. Thank you very much.